Lord, in these times we find ourselves in, times where it's so easy to react, it's so easy to judge. We hear you this morning speaking to our hearts. Please give us ears to hear. Amen. Have a seat. Please. Where's Jana when I need her to preach on the hard sayings of Jesus? Her timing is impeccable. On first glance, that's the kind of teaching that Jesus gives that we just don't like. So before I get to him, let's hear what the psalmist. Sometimes I gloss over the psalm. Here, the psalmist, again, if you don't mind, chapter 37, I'm going to read 7 through 10. If you want, you can close your eyes. These are holy words for God's holy people right about now. Be still before the Lord. Wait patiently for him. Do not fret yourself over the one who prospers, the one who succeeds in evil schemes. Refrain from anger, leave rage alone. Do not fret yourself. It only leads to evil. For evildoers shall be cut off, but those who wait upon the Lord shall possess the land. Hear what the Spirit is saying to God's people. Thanks be to God. This is the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the concentration camp, Auschwitz-Birkenau. Keep an eye on the news. Our German friends are right now going to the polls. So I wonder how much of them, when they cast their ballot today, is going to remember about a month ago on January 27th when the last remaining survivors of Auschwitz-Birkenau in Poland gathered for an observance of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. You're wondering why we have invited Clarice Wilsey back to her home parish, if I can call it that. Clarice used to be a member here. Don't quote me on these dates, but I think I got them right, 1981 to 1998. 81 to 98. So Clarice, I'm sure you can correct us when you get here. Next month, she's coming on March 25th to Good Shepherd. It's right here in the sanctuary from 6:30 to 7:30-ish, and then we're going to have a light reception in Founders Hall. Clarice is going to come back and share about the experiences of her Army dad doctor, who was the first GIs through the gates of Dachau, the other concentration camp. This one, however, is outside of Munich in Bavaria in Germany. And she's going to have her books for sale, or I know some people are getting them online right now. Letters from Dachau, subtitle, A Father's Witness of War and a Daughter's Dream of Peace. I've shared with some people lately who this is a topic of discussion for me, but when my wife and I watched the Holocaust Memorial Remembrance Day celebration, that's not quite the word, it's remembrance, we both, she especially, saw us, because Clarice is in our OSL group, she's with the Order of St. Luke here, she's very faithful, and so she called her and she's going to come back and talk about this, but one of the things she really wants to talk about, and this is really important, if you're here and I'm looking for my acolytes, but they're all on retreat. That's why, thank you for lighting the candles. All the kids would be the ones doing all that, but us older people. But I'm looking around, so if you're over 40, 85% of us believe that the Holocaust happened. We believe it was true. There was no, not a movie set somewhere in Pinewood Studios in London where they were faking it, like it happened. 1.1 million people were just killed at Auschwitz alone. And just in case you're wondering, they weren't just Jews, they were Poles, they were Roma or Gypsies. If that's the politically correct word anymore, it's probably not, so forgive me there. Soviet prisoners of war, the Nazis killed gay people, blacks, disabled people, Jehovah's Witnesses, Freemasons, not just our Jewish brothers and sisters. So if you're over 40, 85% of us know that the Holocaust actually happened. Here's the kicker, and this is really on Clarice's heart. If you're under 30, it drops down to 40%. So your grandchildren, if you ask them, do you know about the Holocaust? And they go, no, that's your job. So your job is to, if you have young people in your life, Clarice really wants them to get here on the 25th. That's the audience she's targeting, but it's going to be a packed house. It's a heavy subject, and it's not going to get easier because I'm going to wade into a heavy subject, which we just heard, about forgiving those who kill you, or persecute you, or hate you, or love your enemies. Are you kidding me? I mean, just for the sake of it, because I can't get it out of my mind, I've been following the release of the hostages on both sides, just in case you don't think the Jewish moms and dads and husbands and wives aren't excited to get their loved ones back in one piece, so to speak. So are the Palestinians excited to get their husbands and brothers mainly, and sons and nephews back in one piece. But I can't get out of my mind the release of the one young Jewish man who was scooped up, I believe, at the Nova Music Festival. And I know you can argue with me, and that's fine. I know I have a one-way street when I'm in the pulpit, so you can't argue with me when I'm in the pulpit, but I'm happy to argue with you somewhere else. But you can argue, well, it's ghoulish the way they parade them out on that stage, Hamas, that is, and make a laughing stock of them, and it's humiliating, it's condescending, it's just heaping coals on top of coals. But I'm getting to the point I'm making is the Jewish young captor. He turned and he kissed the Hamas guy on the forehead. Now, the cynical part of me wants to say, oh, that's just Stockholm Syndrome. That syndrome where you bond with your captors. I know that's out there, but I'm a missionary man. I'm a man who tries to see God working in places where normal folk, including myself, don't know. So I'm really trying to look for where God's working. And he planted a kiss on the forehead of his captor. What's that all about? I think it's all about what we heard in the gospel today with Joseph and his brothers. So I get a little ahead of myself. I try to get an understanding of how we can forgive. And some of you remember my Lenten book recommendations are coming out next week. I won't tell you right now. You'll see it on all our social media. But some of you remembered a few years back, maybe 8 years now, I assigned the Queen's rabbi. So the Queen, now she's in heaven, the King, Charles, he has a rabbi that he taps for his court. And this bloke, Jonathan Sachs, who, by the way, died tender age of only 72 years old from bloody cancer, what a loss he was to the world. Some of you remember the name of his book, and I got a lot of pushback on this because he talks in his book, Rabbi Sachs, not in God's name. He talks about how we can forgive such unspeakable evil, and could we even if we tried. And in his book, Sachs suggests that the sort of sibling rivalry we see in the Genesis reading between Joseph and his siblings is the most primal form of violence that the human race has ever known. And he harkens back to, of course, the first real sin of the Bible was what? Take it easy on Eve. It's not her fault. The first real sin was Cain killing his brother, fratricide. And there's a guy called Rene Girard. This is way more than you want to know, but I see it all the time. Rene Girard, he just recently died. he wasn't so much a theologian as he was an archaeological, philosophical dude from Montreal, Canada. He taught at McGill University. And he has a book, I Saw Satan Fall Like Lightning from Heaven. It's in the scriptures of the Old Testament. And when I talk about sibling rivalry, Rene Girard latches onto that and he cranks it through his algorithm, if you will. And what Rene Girard has come up with, which I think we are still seeing right now, not only in our country, but I just mentioned Germany at the beginning of this sermon, we are seeing it right now in Germany. And that is, in layperson's terms, the scapegoating mechanism is in full effect. Thank you. The scapegoating mechanism is in full effect. If you want to get Greek on you and me, Rene Girard calls it his mimetic theory. It's from the Greek word mimesis. Mimesis means rivalry. What human beings have never learned, and we keep falling into this trap all the time, is we're always looking at what the other person is doing, and we can't be differentiated enough. I sound like now I'm back in seminary. We can't be differentiated enough. So what do? Give me that. Very powerful. Or if we're not grabbing it, like, look at the kids in the sandbox. Like, look at children and toddlers in the sandbox, and as the teacher, bring the one child a brand new toy and see what the other child does. It's inherent. And what Jesus is trying to do here, and what the Gospels and even the Old Testament scripts are trying to do, as we grow up, we are supposed to get rid of that. We are supposed to put away those childlike ways of rivalry, but we don't. And writ large, what it happens at the geopolitical level, and people get killed. I called my German friend up this week, and he had tears in his eyes. He's in a law firm with a Turkish attorney. And this Turkish attorney has been in Germany for 25 years. In fact, got his law degree there in Germany. And he said his colleague is scared to death. He's going to be deported. Scared to death. He's raised his children. They all speak Deutsch. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Jawohl, ein bisschen, meneer. That's Dutch, meneer, mevrouw, alsjeblieft. I'm getting my languages mixed up. So this is very real stuff. In the story of Joseph, if you have the time, it's like the best soap opera you've ever read. You have to go back to chapter 37 and go up through chapter 50, where you can see what really, it's a heck of a story, how basically Joseph, in chapter 37, is only 17 years old. And by the end of the Genesis, he dies in Egypt at the age of 110. So do the math. That's 93 years separated from his family. 93 years. And Joseph's story features 3 sets of 2 dreams, all of which are construed as divine messages. The Savior time, give you the Cripps version. These 6 dreams turn Joseph's life into a living nightmare. Some of the deepest hurts, here it is, some of the deepest hurts that we experience come from our own families. And it's often through no fault of our own. Such was the case with Joseph. His brothers resented their father's favoritism of him. So they sold him into Midian slave traders, who in turn sold him to Egypt, to an official named Potiphar. This began 13 years of exile and imprisonment for Joseph. And as the story unfolds, then the roles are reversed. That's where we come today's reading. Back in Israel, Joseph's brothers and extended family are starting to experience the famine. And then Joseph shows up. It is one of the most profound scenes you will find in all of literature, in my opinion, where they don't recognize him at first, but he says these words to his brothers, who he hasn't seen in a long time. Not just hasn't seen them in a long time, they basically wished he was dead. He says, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. I submit to you that last sentence, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. That's something you and me, if we're struggling with forgiveness, we got to take that to prayer. Because if you can get to the point in your life where you can confront your abuser or your person who wishes you dead, so to speak, if you can say to them, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. That's not you doing it because you can't do it, and that's not saying I'm excusing people who really, really have hurt you. So I got to be careful here. I am not, because pastors can be accused of this. I am not saying you need to, let's say, go back to your abusing boyfriend or husband or abusing wife or girlfriend, because it can happen both ways, because that's the godly thing to do. I'm not saying that. If you're in an abusive relationship, you need to get out of that relationship. And there are many resources out there. Just call me and Jana and we'll help point you in the right direction. That's real. God is not saying be a doormat. What I'm talking about is bigger than all of us. I'm talking about the reign of God, God's economy, the kingdom of God, where we're all sinners. We're all forgiven. All of us. Sometimes I'm accused, what about Adolf Hitler? Well, now you put me on the spot. Yeah, I believe God forgave and forgives Adolf Hitler. Because if he doesn't forgive Adolf Hitler, we're all in trouble. Barbara Brown Taylor. I haven't quoted her in a long time. She's still alive. She's probably the single greatest living Episcopal preacher on the planet today. She taught homiletics. She was one of those clergy gals, she happens to be a woman, who parish ministry wasn't for her. I respect that. And she went back and got her PhD, and she taught homiletics at a college, at a seminary in Georgia, actually, outside of Atlanta. And she writes these little books now, and she preaches around the country. She's too expensive to bring her here, but that's beside the point. She says this about the Joseph story. Barbara Brown Taylor, that's her name. Barbara Brown Taylor says that Joseph saw a pattern in what was happening. That is, he could see God's fingerprints all over the place. God isn't a puppeteer making things happen. God, Taylor says, is more like an artist, for whom nothing is too bent to be used, not even tragedies, not even bad decisions, not even plain human meanness. Joseph, she says, is a living work of art. I like that. I like that a lot. At least 4 times, Joseph reassures his nervous brothers that it was not you who sent me to Egypt, but it was God. And it's a radical idea to think that God is like that he knows every hair on our head, and that by divine design, if you can call it that, and I know some people, especially Episcopalians, they don't like to say, well, everything happens for a reason, but there is some theological truth to our Christian friends who say to us, you know, Tom, it all happens for a reason because of God's divine design, because of the reign of God. There's some truth to that. There's some truth to that. And when I hear the song, that old spiritual song, I don't know if it's a spiritual song, but it's the song, His Eye is on the Sparrow. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free, for His eye is on the sparrow. And I know He watches me. I like that. I like that. Back to the gospel for this Sunday. I don't like it when Jesus says, love your enemies. I don't like it when He says, do good to those who hate you. I don't like it when He says, bless those who curse you. I don't like it when He says, pray for those who abuse you. I don't like it when He says, if you get struck on the cheek, turn the other one. And if anyone takes a coat from you, don't even withhold your shirt. I don't like it when He says, be merciful just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive. and you will be forgiven. Damn it, that is hard teaching. It's hard to do. And I can't do that on my own. I can't. And I've had a charmed life, don't get me wrong, but I got my demons. And I have a tough time letting go. I'm half Italian. I hold grudges. I'm just putting it out there. I hold grudges. And that's not godly at all. It's a blessing and a curse to have, if anything, I'm like my grandmother in heaven, Edna. She's my paternal grandmother. That woman had a memory like a vice grip. And when people say, oh, Father Tom, how do you remember people's names and faces so much? I say, I don't know, man. I get it from my gram. Edna, I remember those who have hurt me. I remember those who speak ill of me. And if you really want to get my Italian dander up, I remember those who speak ill of my family, my wife or my kids. God, forgive me. I say that Lord's Prayer. We're going to say it in about 20 minutes, just like you do. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Our own sense of the need of forgiveness is the basis upon which we freely forgive others. But here it is. We forgive because we have been forgiven, and we can only long for ourselves what we lavish upon others. This week, it reminded me of what happened when I was in Pennsylvania, and it was breaking news that night. And I'm not going to go into it because we got young people here, but right there it was. My memory serves me sometimes. It came flooding back. I'm talking about the tragedy of the one-room schoolhouse in Lancaster County called Nickel Mines, where 10 little girls He did a terrible thing. He did a terrible thing, and you know why he did it? Because he left a note. He left a note, a suicide note, and his wife shared it with the press. They lost a child. She died about 20 minutes after childbirth. And his name is Charles, the perpetrator. Charles was so angry at God, he decided to take it out on these little girls because his little girl died. You can't put your brain, you cannot unpack that. You cannot unpack that. But what I also can't unpack is how the daughter, the grandfather of the little girl who died, he and his wife showed up at Charles's front door, and his wife, the widow, answered the door, and she almost collapsed. And Daniel, the grandfather, the Amish grandfather, said, "We are here to forgive you and your husband for what he did." I had a guy from Elizabethtown College named Don Craybill, Kraybil. He's the world's foremost Anabaptist professor and theologian. He knows the Amish front and back. And I was at a conference about a week after Nickel Mines, and he was the guest speaker. And all the clergy in the room, including me, we were fuming. We wanted this guy to burn. And we were mad we didn't get a chance to see him hung high because, the troopers came in. He took his own life before they... Anyway, we were angry. I was angry. And I said to Craybill, I said, how can they do that? How can they forgive so quickly? And he said this. He said, you will never understand what it is, but the Amish, when they come into the world, they surrender all of their individual rights and liberties. The Amish, when they come into the world, they surrender to the group. And that's how they're able to forgive like that. Because it's never, since they come into the world as babies, it's never about me, myself, and I, which we white people, or as they call us, the English, which we know the minute we come out of the womb. We try to, what's in it for me? Can you see how self-destructive it is to be that self-centered? Can you see right now, February 2025, a world which is having a very, very difficult time thinking about the other person first before they think about themselves? So, there's a Nazi Holocaust survivor, and she died in 2019. But she made a film. It's on Amazon Prime called Forgiving Dr. Mengele. Her name is Eva Kor. And like the Amish, this woman, by the grace of God, because it's only by God's grace, she returned in 1995 for the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. And on that occasion, she did the unthinkable. She read aloud her personal official declaration of amnesty to Joseph Mengele and the Nazis. To be liberated from the Nazis was not enough, she said. She needed to be released from the pain of the past and to extend forgiveness without prerequisites required of the perpetrators, said Eva, was an act of self-healing. Through the act of forgiving your worst enemy, Eva Kor said that she experienced, I'm just telling you what she said, the feeling of complete freedom from pain anymore. How dare she forgive Joseph Mengele? How dare that Jewish hostage kiss the Hamas captor on the forehead? How dare Daniel Peachy goes to the door and says to the widow, "We forgive you and what your husband did." How dare they? So I go to Nick Cave's page online, the Red Hand Files. I know some of you like that little tip, and some of you are getting ready to go see him in concert in May. Wish I could go. I'm not going to be around, but I want to hear all about it. I go to Nick Cave's Red Hand page, and there it is. God serves up on a platter once again. You never can believe how much theology I get off of that darn website, the Red Hand Files, but I got it from the post that came out this week by a bloke in Deutschland, in Germany. His name is Jörg. And I'd like to end with this, if you don't mind, because as you can tell, I'm having a struggle, and I'm working this out just like you are. There's no easy answers. Jesus, help me, please. Jörg from Germany wrote to Nick Cave this week, and he said this. They say you should separate the art from the artist. I can't do that. My childhood heroes have all become monsters. And now, Nick, I hear that the song you want at your funeral is I Am God by Kanye West. Jörg says, how the hell can you listen to that song without seeing the scum of a human being? And I would add, on an editorial note here, Kanye has come out recently and tweeted that he thinks Adolf Hitler is a great guy and that he admires the Nazis. Kanye West. So Jörg wants to understand, how can you say you want his song, I Am God, to be played at your funeral? Listen carefully to Nick's response. We are all broken, Nick says. That's it right there. It starts with, forgiveness starts with getting in touch with your brokenness. Right there it is. Nick says we're all broken, we're all flawed, we're all suffering human beings, each a disaster in our own right, each of us with the capacity to cause great harm, each brimming with misguided notions, perhaps the most diluted of which is the belief that we are somehow exclusively and morally superior to everyone else. And many of you might be thinking, well, speak for yourself, Nick. I'm not like Kanye. I could never behave like that. Nick responds, yet given the circumstances, we humans are capable of anything. And to be human is to be flawed, yet it is also to possess the potential to achieve staggering things, beautiful, brilliant, inspiring, wild, and audacious things, things to be cherished despite our complex and compromised natures. As odious and disappointing as many of Kanye's views are, and as sickening as anti-Semitism is, in its sadly always present, ever morphing forms, I endeavor to seek beauty wherever it presents itself. And in doing so, I am reluctant to invalidate the best of us in an attempt to punish the worst. I don't think we can afford that luxury. That's Jesus, that last sentence. What if I said, this is Jesus talking? Jesus says, I am reluctant to invalidate the best of us in an attempt to punish the worst. I don't think you can afford that luxury.